Let's start talking about instruction for young children with developmental delays and disabilities. There's been a great deal of research around instruction for teaching a variety of useful skills. And several years ago, some colleagues and I were doing a study on teaching children to engage in child-child conversations. So we had a child with, we had 3 children with disabilities, but each of them had 2 typically developing peers with them. And this study went through a lot of phases, and we were prompting them to talk, and their teacher would remind them at the beginning of this time, talk to your friends when you play, and then if they didn't in the first minute, then she'd say, remember, talk to your friends, and then she would say, John, say something to Betty, and if John or Betty didn't have a conversation, then he'd say, John, tell Betty and something about the play. Well, what we learned was that kids learned to talk to each other more. They had more conversations per minute, and they had longer conversations. And pretty soon the teacher wasn't having to remind them to talk at all. But in this study we went across 3 triads of kids, each one having a child with disabilities and 2 typically developing classmates. The poor little child triad at the end had been for several weeks just playing together, but not getting assistance in learning how to talk with one another. And from 0 to 1 conversation per 8 minutes or whatever it was. And then finally we started teaching them. It was part of our design. But it reminded me that if we want children to change, we've got to intentionally do something. They aren't going to, on their own, figure all the important things out. Now, kids learn from their experiences, so that I'm sure they were learning something. But when we have important skills like having a conversation with a peer, that's not an easy skill. It's something that's important. What is the value of life if we don't have friends with whom we can have conversations? And so those things we as adults, as educators, have to be intentional about. We need to identify what's important and then make sure that we provide the children with the experiences. Now, providing the experiences means we have to be systematic in how we arrange those, so that kids from participating in those activities and being in those experiences can acquire and learn to use the skills that we want them to teach, or we want them to learn, that we are trying to teach. And so much of our research and of many colleagues' research over the last 2 or 3 decades have focused on how can we systematically provide those instruction, or provide that instruction. Clearly with toddlers and preschoolers, we aren't going to stand up and give a lecture. If we want to change what kids do, we can stand up and give a lecture, and what they will learn is chaos can ensue, and we might even learn that. And so we have to be down there structuring it. And we've done several studies where we tried to structure adult-child interactions by giving kids all the help they need to be correct, and then delaying that help in time. So we can think about coming up to wash your hands after I've been finger painting, for example, and I've got paint all over my hands, and so that should tell us, oh, I need to wash my hands. And so we would walk them to the sink or help them get to the sink. And of course the first step would be to turn the water on. And for the first few times, we might reach with their hand or help them reach with their hand and turn the water on. But then we would delay it in time. And so we might get to the sink and count 1001, 1002 in our head and then give them the help. But it gives them a little window there that they could do it on their own and get the water coming on their own without our help. But if they aren't sure what to do, then our help will be coming pretty quickly and they won't be left to flounder. And we can wait then. After they've done it for a couple seconds, we would delay our help maybe 4 seconds before they would get the help. And this has resulted in kids learning new skills very quickly and without a lot of errors. Now, sometimes errors are okay for kids, that is, they aren't harmful. But with some kids, the presence of errors can result in problematic behavior. And so with those children, we definitely want to prevent the problematic behavior, and the way we do that is preventing the errors. Most of us like to be successful. Now, we also like to take chances, and so if we're trying out something new, we might like to go do it. But where the stakes are high with young children, we want to make sure that they're successful. So many of our kids will encounter so much failure in just the normal course of their days that when we're trying to teach them, we want them to be as successful as they possibly can. And so not only do we have to be intentional, we have to be systematic about doing that so that they actually learn what we want. Another thing about instruction, and maybe this is why it's so appealing to me and why I've studied it most of my life, is that it can be a lot of fun. And so if we're smart about it and we're being systematic, it's a lot of fun to see a child who didn't know how to put on his coat, had to wait for the teacher to go outside to get his coat on before he could go outside, being able to put it on himself. That's fun. That's where the joy of this is. And of course, if we're being smart about it, we're going to look for ways that make skills easy for kids to learn. For example, in putting on a coat, sometimes we teach kids to hold the top of the coat, put one arm through, and they kind of have to pull it up, and then they reach back behind and do it. But another way is to lay the coat, collar facing this child, on a table, and with the inside of the coat facing up. And then all I have to do is put both my arms in the two sleeves and flip it over my head. And sometimes children can learn to do that in 3 or 4 times of needing to put their coat on, as compared to maybe taking 6 or 8 or 10 days of trying to learn to put it on in the more traditional way. And the issue is the coat's on, so it's okay, I can go out and I'm not going to be cold when we go out to play. And it gets done, and it gets done fast. And that's just about being smart, intentional, systematic, and then that's where it's fun for both the child and for the instructor.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.